So, in my big review of the year and even sort of some of the predictions I did of like 2025, uh, I didn't mention Ukraine. And I thought that really it needs its own sort of video of what I think will happen. As you know, I am an eternal optimist. I really think this year is either going to be the end potentially of this war, or it will be the beginning of the end. We have seen on a couple of occasions big top level Russian officials say, yeah, we can't fight beyond 2025, that 2025 was like the tipping point for them. And I've got two threads here by two experts, one in a military capacity, which we're going to talk about to tell you about how bad Russia's military is faring. Unfortunately, I can't show you the thread because, well, the thread includes lots of pictures, shall we say, of unalived Russian soldiers. And I can, of course, show you the other one, though, because that talks about the economic side that Russia is going through. And if you put these two things together, eventually something's got to give. Like something has got to give. And it's not just too long ago, bear in mind, that in quite a typical, oh dear, this is just how bad the Russian military is doing at the moment. Obviously, we all know that they brought in North Korean soldiers to fight for them. Well, if you've been keeping attention on what's happened, if not, this is a funny surprise. Up in sort of the Kursk region, there are, of course, Chechnyan blockers, but there are also now these North Korean soldiers. And in an attempted advance to attack the Ukrainians, they inadvertently ended up attacking these Chechnyans, and the Chechnyans fought back. And it took them a day to realize that they were both attacking each other. That's how bad the situation was. They didn't really realize who was firing on each other until the artillery crew that they were calling in was realizing that they were being asked to fire on North Korean positions, and the North Koreans were asking them to fire on Chechen positions. Whoops. Anyway, yeah. So before we get into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and of course subscribe button. And of course, down below there's the Buy Me Coffee link where you can buy me coffee. There's the Patreon page as well. There's the YouTube thank you button, and of course there's the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on then into this. So first one's first. This is the Russian thing. So the Russians currently have adopted what they've called a small step advance. And what does that actually mean for Russia? How does this actually fit into it? And what will potentially be the ultimate consequences of this? Well, the ultimate consequences is it's going to lead to a lot more casualties. So, how does Russia's small step advance on the battlefield actually work? How do the pieces of a very small puzzle, of course, fit together? I will describe the essence here. We all heard that Russia has now changed its meat grinder tactics, but why did the number of casualties go up? It took an interview with a defected Russian soldier and, of course, some telegram messages to actually make these pieces fit together. The general background picture is firstly that Russia is in a make-do situation. This is the best that they can do with their present weapons and men. But what does this mean? This means that they are now maxed out. It also means that Russia can be pushed over the edge. Secondly, Putin conveys to his subjects and, of course, believers, and that he is convinced he will win this war. In reality, he cannot pull out, which in itself would be wise. Wouldn't be wise, shall we say. It would be political suicide. This is the Russia's now new style of meat grinder warfare. Have at least 4 to 5 men reach a point about 250 meters from the Ukrainian positions. Most will likely be killed trying. Then slip some through the maze. Second, they will then spot Ukrainian hideouts and weapons and try and report the coordinates. Then Russian artillery will now concentrate fire on that area. Frequent firing will prevent the Ukrainians from moving. There is not enough time, of course, between the shells, and a direct hit now is just a matter of time. And Russia now uses easily movable artillery like the 122 D-30. Point 4, the Russian infantry will then go and take over these Ukrainian positions, unless they miscalculate, in which case we now see columns of Russian vehicles go up in smoke. While losing at least 8 to 10,000 men a week, and of course countless tanks and artillery and other vehicles, they still advance. Experienced military will also immediately see what might be done against it, and of course Ukraine would probably have asked for it. That is, of course, more of everything. More shells and artillery, HIMARS and missiles, more counter-battery systems, more FPV drones, area weapons, and anti-personnel mines. Some will add, again, air superiority and the end of the Russian, that will end the Russian glide bombs. More soldiers, maybe. Roof protected trenches, more hideouts, machine guns, positions, again, evacuation options. So that is essentially the current state. And that this new tactic isn't working out. Because obviously the Ukrainians have even got on by now what they can do. And bear in mind, this is what happened during the Second World War. Russia would launch this massive artillery bombardment and then go to the area and try and take it over. Now, the problem is, if again, what the Germans ended up doing was, oh, we know this massive artillery bombardment is coming, so we're just going to move our troops out, and into, either more protected positions or just out of the area of fire. And then once the artillery bombardment is over, move back into position. Like I say, there's a lot of stuff going on there, and I don't think the battlefield, of course, is going to, continue to go in Putin's favor. Yes, they might make advances, but it's going to be an absolute extreme cost in lives, material, and stuff that they just do not have. That they really are this year going to reach a tipping point. And we've already have seen, again, if you've been sort of paying attention to sort of the NAFO looking at this, there have been a couple of low-level mutinies that have basically refused to follow orders. Now, of course, what happens if that turns into a large-scale mutiny? Well, who knows? Maybe we'll see this year. But that's, of course, the battlefield. What about Russia itself? Well, as you know, just a couple of weeks ago, back in November, the Russian ruble absolutely tanked, and it has not recovered. It is still losing value, despite the best efforts of Putin's the Bank of Russia, trying to keep things up and running. It is not going well. So we could see in 2025 huge economic problems hitting Russia very, very significantly. Now, I can show you this thread because, like I say, it's talking about the whole economics of it all. So, the Russian economy is imploding, then threatening Vladimir Putin's grip on power. His Keynesian strategy now to counter Western sanctions is based on subsidizing spending and artificially lowering interest rates. This has backfired catastrophically, plunging the country into a boom and bust cycle, now entering its most devastating phase. The housing market has dropped by currently propped up by state-subsidized mortgages at rates low as 7%, despite real inflation estimated to be at least 27%, is collapsing. Mortgage debt has now surged over 40% of bank lending portfolios, and household debt is now recorded at 22% of GDP. The once dominating housing transactions, mortgages now make up only 20% of sales and 80% being cash purchases. Sellers are now slashing prices by up to 50%, and non-performing loans are now soaring, threatening to sink even regional banks, which hold 40% of the market. Developers are now crippled by overbuilding during the boom, and they are now defaulting on bonds, leading now to widespread losses across the construction sector. So already you can see this isn't going well at all. These ripple effects are, of course, devastating. The Russian stock market has seen all sectors decline sharply. Gazprom is down 16%. Ozon is down by 23%. And Rusal is down by 23% as well in just 1 month. Inflation has now spiraled out of control, forcing the cost of potatoes to rise by 80% this year alone. And if you know anything about Russia, potatoes are like a staple in the Russian diet. Car prices have jumped over 20% after the New Year's. The ruble has lost over 10% of its value 3 times in a single month, reflecting now the deep structural weaknesses. Russia's national budget, calculated, of course, on oil prices, is now 72%, $72 per barrel. And it now faces severe strain as global production rises and prices fall. Experts also predict the ruble may require a devaluation of at least 22 to 35% to sustain government spending. And that oil price, that's going to be big. That is going to be very, very big because we know potentially OPEC is talking about upping production as well, as is every other oil producing country. So that is going to hugely affect Russia because they depend on gas prices, on oil prices, shall we say. And if oil prices lower even more, if they are dependent on like $72 a barrel, which is just completely uneconomical when, OPEC is potentially selling it at maybe like 10 or even like $12 a barrel, it will have a huge impact on the Russian economy. So if you want to see or want to keep an eye on something this year, watch the price of oil. Watch how much it is per barrel and watch how much that changes. If it starts to go lower, the lower it gets, the worse it will be for Russia. International support is, of course, absent. China is now dealing with its own economic woes, including an 18% youth unemployment rate and a real estate debt crisis. This has now limited the capacity to assist Russia. Furthermore, China conducts at least 60% of its trade with the US and Europe versus around 2% with Russia, and is likely to risk sanctions for a marginal ally. Yeah, this has been something that's been constantly talked about this throughout the war, that China is not going to risk its economy or increase more of its trade just to please Putin. In fact, recently there was this big brouhaha in Russia because apparently this map had been released about China like taking over Siberia, which again, nightmare scenario for Putin as well. But hey, if Russia gets this amount of weakened and China wants to take, sort of Siberia and things like, hey, why not? Putin's going to be weak. Why not take it? And if that happens this year, oh boy, that could be a huge development as well. Public, of course, dissatisfaction is growing as the economy now crumbles. Living costs are skyrocketing, wages are stagnating, and layoffs are now widespread. In 2024, over 130,000 jobs were cut in 457 companies, including global tech giants like Tesla, Amazon, and Google. The regime's promise of economic stability is collapsing. So is Putin's now political contract with his people. Historically, economic collapses have, of course, toppled autocrats, and Russia is now currently on a trajectory that mirrors those patterns. Putin's inability to stabilize the economy or even shield ordinary Russians from hardship is now eroding his legitimacy, both amongst the public and the elites. Again, that's probably the most important one, because if the elites decide they've had enough of this, Putin's gone. With the rising now discontent and fractured loyalty from oligarchs, the economy in freefall, Russia is on the brink now of political upheaval. The collapse of Putin's regime may no longer be a distant prospect, it is rapidly becoming an imminent reality. So that's the economic situation. And as you can see, I think this year something's got to give. Something has to give this year. And I know I said that last year. And bear in mind, we did see that. Like we've seen the collapse of the ruble this last year. That was key. That was quite a big moment. Certainly, it really did show that the sanctions were working. That the economic stuff pressure put on Putin is having an impact. We're now seeing this. It goes into 2025. Something's got to give. Something really does have to give here. But it's just what and when we don't know. So, hey, who knows? But I would love to get to the end of this year and do a video that said, this is it. This is the end of, the Ukrainian war. I would love to do that video at some point this year. I really would do. But like I say, who knows? This war has had many, many twists and turns. I suspect we will probably see a lot this year as well, just as we saw last year. So until then, of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.